When we look at supply chain sustainability and technology, one of the key things to use today is AI and blockchain. And today, with the growing needs in the technology space, there are multiple tools available that enable and streamline and make things seamless for all kinds of environments. And very specifically, when we look at supply chain and logistics, there are multiple aspects when products or services are being delivered. And this is where blockchain technology has taken one of the forefront steps into making sure that all of this makes a transparency and traceability component into the supply chain, thus enabling you to report to various compliances like in the EU on CSRD, CBAM, right, where all your products or services delivered in the EU require to be compliant against these two frameworks. And there are multiple others that require supply chain sustainability norms that bring into the concept of addressing materials, especially from a conflict material aspect, and the recent discussion in China as well, right, where they are now restricting rare earth materials. This causes a lot of risk in the system. And this is where you have the ability of AI and blockchain to predict, identify this well in advance. So that's an important part when we look at technology and integrating globalization with supply chain sustainability. So when we look at blockchain technology, I think there is a fear instilled with people who onboard themselves onto this technology. And the main reasons is the unorthodox ways or the non-compliant ways that suppliers still follow across various parts across the globe. And with blockchain technology, it brings in a layer of transparency, right? And that layer of transparency has not been accepted by a lot of users, suppliers, or the conglomerate as such in the supply chain. However, in a lot of cases where adoption of blockchain has happened, there has been significant results in streamlining and making sure the performance, the enhancements of logistics, identifying risks well in advance has been successful. But more so when we look at other technologies that are there in place, right? Like, for example, the DNA in textile, and now in Europe, they're bringing what they call as digital product passports, right? Where these DPPs are very important, which carry the entire footprint of that particular product, right? And it's very similar to how we carry a passport, which has all your most important details right from the day you're born till whatever date you use that passport, right? So very similar what happens with a particular product, where it has originated to where it has been manufactured, where it has been shipped, what were the movements of that product before reaching a particular user or a customer. All of this is now being tracked in what you have as your DPPs. And that's one of the interesting technologies that is soon gaining prominence, and it's going to catch up across the world, and it's quite well advanced now in Europe. So that's a very good example of where blockchain is also being utilized, right? And additional sophistication of the blockchain technology. When we look at the current global scenarios, I think a lot have a perception on the risks that is going to affect sustainability. But in true sense and in reality, the fact is people have become more conscious about sustainability, right? Why is there a pushback on sustainability? Now those questions are being reasoned out, right? There is more value brought into the reasoning of why sustainability for organizations and for the world by large. And that's where we as an organization also has seen that the growing interest, right, in our existing clientele, right, in new prospects, all of them are actually aligning to understand sustainability is not just about emissions, DEI, right? It is encompassing every single aspect of an organization, right, from financial risks to supply chain risks, right? And this was all factored in previously in silos. And that's where sustainability is playing that role of bringing everything into one single basket. And that is where we are seeing that there is no shift in the mindset from a negative thought process, but it's definitely become more stronger and very positive in a lot of companies. And in fact, even logistics has also evaluated, right, post-COVID, various global trade impacts on how to address this from a sustainability lens, right? Not just environment, but also from how social impacts could happen, how financial impacts would happen, and brace in advance before all of this could happen. And yeah, that's where we also bring in our platform, Resustain, that enables this AI based technology and tracking, monitoring, and predictive aspects to identify and preempt before something happens, right? And we've been very closely working on this technology, which we should be having soon released, right, to predict and keep you informed, not just from a near term, but from actually a very long term, at least 20, 30, 40 years down the line, how this could impact you and what needs to be done today. When we look at logistics, especially from an aviation or maritime perspective, a lot of them have already been able to report on what are the emissions for a product being delivered across the globe from a location A to B or A to B to C to D, right? But actually, there's a huge ecological impact apart from emissions. And one of the best cases has been noticed in shipping industry, the maritime industry, where a lot of produce, the agricultural produce that is being shipped from regions like New Zealand, Australia, bring in invasive species along with that shipment, right, to countries like or waters around the European region, the North American region, which is also destroying the flora, the fauna, the aquamarine life. All of this is affecting, which is also in turn causing an imbalance in the ecosystem. And one of the big areas where emissions actually are being stored is in your ice caps, right? And by these maritime, through aviation, right, there's a lot of ecological damage. Your birds that fly across or migrate across global spaces, which is not bordered for them, right, are now becoming extinct or are moving and navigating to multiple other areas that were not explored by them, leading to cross pollination, impacts on impacts on the existing species in that particular region, right? And led to what you call as eutrophication, a lot of chemical toxicity in the water levels, not allowing for consumption either for human or for even other life systems. So this process of ecological imbalances are being caused in the in the maritime and aviation industry. So this is where a lot of them are now moving into sustainable fuels, right? Aviation is now having sustainable fuel, reducing the damage, but still there are a lot more aspects that need to be looked into because of the growing need in terms of consumption, production. The shipping industry, the aviation industry has grown in the number of vessels or flights, which is affecting the space drastically, right? And even today, if we take 10 years back and you looked at the global airspace, you would see a lot of blank areas where airspace was unutilized. And today, which is 10 years, if we compare from the past, your airspace, your maritime space have new routes that have been created, which is making a lot of ecological impacts. And that is what is not being looked at in the current space today. And one thing very important, all movement across the globe happens in the logistics space, right? So a lot of the ecological impact apart from emissions happen through these systems of logistics. When we talk about circular economy, most of the people or the world thinks it happens only at the end of life, But circular economy actually starts right from the very stage when you design a product. And one of the key things that happens when you design a product is for the reuse or repurpose aspects when it comes to its end of life. Now, one of the key things in the Indian region is we have always been part of the circular economy system, at least the last 50 years, right? When we go back to our grandparents and beyond the previous generations, we had a very circular system, right? From your milk bottles. We never used to have milk packets. You would have fresh milk delivered at home, right? If it was in a milk bottle, the milk bottle would be picked back by the vendor who services you, cleans it, washes it, and brings you your new milk and fresh milk every day. We had a very circular system, right? But with globalization, high yields, high requirements in terms of financial benefits, and the increase in consumption and production, this has caused new methods of bringing packagized products, which is something that has come in from the West. West have been in the process of high consumption, therefore high monetary benefits. Now, concepts of circular economy in India are actually losing its sheen, which existed, right? One of the best examples also is a newspaper or a banana leaf, right? We still follow in a lot of regions in India. We still prefer to have food in banana leaves, which is then once utilized for human needs, is being utilized as food or fodder to animals, right? And it goes in a very simple circular process. Today we have moved to recycled paper, which is believed to be sustainable, right? But in true fact, it is not. I've done a very detailed analysis on life cycle assessment on packaging products. It is seen that bamboo shoots, banana leaves, right, have a shorter impact or a less impact on the ecological system because they come from the ecological system. Whereas anything processed has very, very high impacts, be it plastic, paper, glass, right, metals, because all these have a combination of different materials, right? So when we look at circular economy in the Indian continent today, I think we are losing our sheen in terms of what our forefathers and ancestors have left behind for us. And organizations in India specifically are looking at growing this only from a financial perspective. They look at, we need to spend more to redesign, we need to spend more to recycle or refurbish or repurpose. So it doesn't work, right? But actually, they haven't done their studies well, right? Because if they are able to repurpose their existing products, for example, buying back spare parts, right, from automobiles, right, or parts utilized in an automobile, there's a lot of material that is there, right? Different types of metals and composites that can be utilized to repurpose or reproductize this for other purposes within the same automobile. So there are opportunities, but it requires a lot more study, analysis, and objective view into understanding the benefits. And that's where India is still progressing, right? We've been very simplified in our ways of not taking study-wise approaches, right? We already had it incorporated, but now moving to the Western culture of high consumption and production, we've lost the concept of circular economy. And that's why we need to be again reoriented by having actual scientific research that can be utilized by organizations. EV is a big topic that everyone is having a lot of questions today. It is true that India still utilizes power that is powering your EV vehicles from non-renewable sources. A larger share comes from them. So it is fair enough to say that is EVs actually sustainable? There are two aspects to EVs, right? One is the materials that are used in EVs, their downstream, which is their disposal phase, is still not addressed well. The reason being the mix or the composites or the combination of materials used, especially rare earth materials, and we are very familiar with the recent impact from China on rare earth, where it goes into a lot of our batteries. right? So with demand and increase in EVs, the disposal is still not managed well, right? What is the process? How do we dispose, right? But that's still not the consumer's problem, right? Or neither a manufacturer's problem, right? So we're still not there yet to address that. But the bigger question is, until we have renewable energy to power our EV vehicles, we are still going to be in that phase of emitting. But does an ICE engine emit same as an EV vehicle using non-renewable energy? That is the question that India very specifically needs to be addressing, right? Because burning fuel as diesel or burning fuel as coal is more impactful. But one of the advantages in this is the Indian electricity grid is becoming a mixed electricity source. There's a lot of renewable energy now available within the energy within in India. So that way, we can still say that EVs are the pathway we need to proceed, but there is always the concept of imbalance, right? And too much of anything is not good, right? It is going to have its impacts, and that's the case with non-renewables. We started using it extensively, right, post or during the industrial revolution and post-industrial revolution, and today here we are with discussing how do we stop that. And the same is going to happen as we increase EV utilization, right, or using electric energy, using batteries to power our vehicles. There are other green methods other than EVs. Green hydrogen, right, is being explored, but safety and other related aspects do come into the picture, right? And in fact, in a large sense, nuclear, right, has a lot of answers, but the only aspect is the level of danger it holds to the human race, right, if it's in the wrong hands. So till we address that, I think we are bound to have EV still growing in this way. And I think when EV hits the same stage of what we've seen with fossil fuels, there will be a new revolution and new introduction into the system beyond EVs, right? So that's straight how India is also going to progress. Good examples to take is countries like Sweden. I've been in Sweden for a couple of years. They are completely almost 100% renewable, right, in their grid energy. And those countries have a high consumption of high energy consumption per capita. But looking at their scenario, EVs is definitely the way because they are already renewable, right? So they are already able to handle the capacity, the load required for increase in EVs. But that's something that India still has not addressed. Imagine today all the ICE engines switch over to EV. We don't have the capacity to handle that, right? As a country, we need a lot more demand and supply that is required. So a lot more intricate aspects are to be considered. And yeah, this is also one form of logistics. How do you get your energy supply and demand in place?